Okay, great to have everybody here today with us. Got it all set up here for our recording. So today is October 30th. Almost happy Halloween to everybody.
Yeah.
I'm going to mute everybody here just so that I'll unmute in a few minutes. So because it's an open forum. So just to be clear to everybody who's not been here before, I do this once a month, every month, on the 30th of the month, obviously not in February. It's the last day of the month in February, whatever that is, depending on if it's a leap year. But the 30th of every month, just to keep it simple. You always know it's on the 30th. It's going to change different days of the week sometimes and so forth, but it's always at the same time. And our friends in Asia and Australia watch the recording. And then they can send me, and anybody can send me in the world, they can send me questions and, email or text it to me or whatever. And I'll answer the questions if you can't be here live. Doesn't matter where you are in the, on the planet. You can just shoot me a text or an email. It's fine. In fact, in a minute, I'm going to start out with somebody's question. Who did email me a question. But yeah, so it's Halloween tomorrow. So we got a happy Halloween to everybody. And as I said, this is an open forum Q&A. I'll leave this on speaker view because people have said to me that, when people are speaking and it's a big group of people like it generally is in these sessions, you get this teeny little thumbnail, and it's hard to see who's speaking and so forth. So I just keep it on speaker view now so that if you do want to be seen, then you have to turn your video on. Just a little tech issue there for you on Zoom. You have to turn your video on. Otherwise, it'll just have your name. So again, for privacy reasons, if people just don't want to turn their video on, that's fine. I'm just telling you how the Zoom system works. But there's no need for you to turn your video on if you want to be private. That's okay. Again, this is an open forum. You guys can ask me anything about anything related to the afterlife. Those of you who are here for the first time, just a heads up, I'll give you a quick, brief, a few sentences about my background. But you can always go to my website, kelvinchin.org. You can read about my background in more detail there. You also, on kelvinchin.org, there's a 10-minute video that kind of introduces this monthly session. So it gets into a little more detail than what I'm going to tell you in a minute, because I like to jump right into the Q&A as quickly as possible. And I keep this pretty much to 90 minutes because this could go on for days nonstop, people asking questions. So I try to respect people's time in that respect, okay? But my background, just briefly, when I was 19 years old, I learned to meditate. And that really started opening me up. But that's not why I learned. I learned because I was highly anxious. I was not into spiritual stuff. I didn't know what spirituality was. If you asked me when I was a 19-year-old college kid, I would have thought it has to do with religion or something, I went to the Congregational Church in Norwood, Massachusetts. So that's how I thought spirituality, what it meant. Of course, then after I learned to meditate, I not only got rid of my anxiety, then I started teaching meditation a few years later. Some of you are my students, and I've been teaching for 50 years now, thousands of people around the world. I started opening up, and in the mid 1970s, I started having past life memories. So that's what this book is about. So I got 3 books. This book is all about my past life memories, right? Go back 6,000 years and so forth. Those of you who have read any of my books, feel free to ask me questions about that, any of the stuff in the books, because I cover all kinds of afterlife stuff, as well as other stuff in the books. But feel free to bring any of that stuff up in these Q&As that we do monthly, today and every month. So that started happening in the mid-70s, okay? I was in my mid-20s. And in the mid-1980s, I started opening up spontaneously to the other side, and I started getting communications. Again, when this started happening, I thought I was making it up. I thought it was my imagination until I started getting external corroboration and stuff. Same thing with the past life memories. I just thought it was my fantasy imagination, a colorful imagination. But then I started realizing that, oh, this happened and that happened. Oh, that goes with this and this goes with that and so forth. And it started making sense. And that's when I started changing my belief system. But that goes to my point about belief systems, which is a very important point in everything that I do, including these sessions especially, but everything that I do. I'm not here to change people's belief systems. So whatever your belief system is, it is. And it's up to you to change it or not change it. So that's not my goal or objective. It never is. I'm here to explain things through my experiences and my interpretations of my experiences. As you've seen through that very brief bio that I just gave you, I've had a lot of different experiences over the last 50 years. So that's what I draw from. And they're my interpretations. So I'm not saying my interpretations are absolutely correct or the only interpretations. No, in fact, there's as many interpretations of these experiences as there are minds in the universe. That's how many interpretations there are. So nobody has the angle on the absolute interpretation of an experience. Okay, nobody does. And if anybody tries to tell you that, that's a big red flag. Okay. I'm into teaching people how to think independently, and that means thinking independently from me too. So you question what I'm saying, and feel free to ask me questions and so forth in any of these discussion groups that I have, okay? So why do I do it on the 30th? So just a quick thing on that. I do it on the 30th of the month because I thought, I want to do it on one same monthly day to make it easy scheduling-wise and remembering-wise, as I already told you. But I picked the 30th because this is an event that I helped organize in 2014 on the 30th November. So if those of you who haven't seen it yet, you should go check it out. I think you'll find it very interesting. It's basically an explanation of spirituality on planet Earth in the Judeo-Christian Islamic Vedic traditions over the last 10,000 years. Okay? That's a mouthful. That's a mindful, right? So feel free to go check that out. I'm not going to give you that discussion again. My friend George Hammond did that. He got a download from the other side about all that. You can watch that, 30thnovember.com, 30thnovember.com. That's the website for that. Okay, I helped organize that. Well, after George got a download, within, I don't know, wasn't keeping a journal, but within days, I started getting communications from the other side, from the same group of people and so forth, about stuff that they wanted to have discussed. And then within a few months, I would say, within a few months after that, so this was in January 2014 when he got the first download. So you can do the math and you see what is 11 months later was the actual event in November. So within a few months after I started getting stuff, a few days after he got the downloads, many dozens of people, I don't know how many people, but I know of at least 24 people who contacted me because through the grapevine, they found out I was organizing this event that was going to happen 11 months later. And people just started contacting me from around the world saying, hey, I got this communication in my dream last night, or I was sleeping and my room lit up and there was this being standing there telling me stuff that I should go check out this thing on November, whatever, and November 30th and so forth. So I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of people got visitations. Maybe some of you did. If you did, I'd love to hear about it back then in 2014, if you had any visitations like this. But I know of at least 24 people who contacted me who I previously did not know, had separate communications about this stuff. So anyway, check that out. That's why I do it on the 30th of the month every month. So there you go. That's my quick, brief overview just to kind of set the stage for anybody who's very, very new to this this group here. There's like I have 150 people who sign up for this, but a lot of people watch the recordings afterwards. But we got 15 or 20 live people here today. So and then who knows how many on Facebook Live. So let's just open it up for Q&A now. Oh, let me open it up this way. I'll kind of prime the pump, as they say, with a question that I got from Jody. So Jody couldn't be here with us today, but he sent me an email or a text message or whatever, and here's the question. So he said, here's my question in the spirit of Halloween. So he did reference Halloween being tomorrow. He said, what exactly are ghosts and hauntings? What exactly are ghosts and hauntings? That's his question. Okay, so that one question I can cover several different topics, all right? And then we'll open it up, open the floor up to all of you guys to follow up and ask any other questions related to this or not, any other questions about the afterlife and stuff. Okay, so first of all, my experience is that we continue after we biologically die. What continues? Our mind, our soul, our spirit, our consciousness, whichever word you want to use. I have clients now in 66 countries. I just picked up another African country the other day, Mozambique, and so forth. And so I'm up to 66 countries. I'm helping people around the world with all of this kind of these different topics and issues. So I use simple language is my point. So I try to use easy English. So mind, I call it mind, but you might think of it as spirit or soul or consciousness or awareness. To me, it's all the same thing. It's just different words for the same thing. It's our individual mind that's speaking to you and looking at this camera now, talking to you into this laptop. That's my mind. It's speaking and making decisions and waving my hands around and stuff. But it's also this larger sense of self, right? That's, to me, it's not just this, it's this too. It's the vastness, the hugeness of each of our individual minds. That's when you hear me use the word mind, that's what I mean by mind. Okay. So that continues after we biologically die. So what are ghosts, he's asking, Jody's asking. I think ghosts are minds that have biologically died. In other words, they don't have a physical biological body anymore, obviously, but they still have, we can still retain a form if we want to. So sometimes you can see ghosts, sometimes you can't see ghosts, all right? They're just dead people is what they are. And the simple answer is they're dead people. But sometimes ghosts may be very friendly. Sometimes they're mischievous. They hide stuff, right? Have you ever had that experience? I have. And other times they might be a little nefarious. They might have some negative kind of thing going on with them. All right. What does that example teach us about the afterlife? That teaches us about the afterlife is that the mind not only continues, but the mind continues, the second point, mind continues, and the mind continues with the same or similar personality and baggage, we'll call it, or, you know, it doesn't have to be negative baggage. It could be positive traits, we'll call them. Traits may be a more neutral word. They continue with the same traits that they had when they died. Each of us, you, me, anybody. So when we continue with that, if we have a mischievous kind of trait to our personality, you could be a mischievous being on the other side, call yourself a ghost if you want to, and still hang out here and tease people and kind of hide their watches and their car keys and their this or that or whatever. I've had car keys. This happened in 1978, 79. I remember I was with my wife and we were traveling, visiting a friend, and we, anyway, the short story is that happened. So but the personality, see, the traits continue. And if the person is fearful, they, number one, may try to scare you and do things like that, because that's a fearful person. They also may be fearful to move on completely, to have what we call, what we in the, in the Western, well, not Western, maybe, in the Christian kind of world, we tend to call it heaven. All right. But if you're in Scandinavia, you have a little history, ancient history kind of, or older history in Scandinavia, you may call it Valhalla, you may call it Nirvana, the Buddhists call it Nirvana. If you want to go ancient Greece or ancient Rome, Elysium, whatever, the afterlife. That's why I just used kind of general, generic, non-cultural, non-religious terms when I speak. So I just call it the afterlife. But a fearful person who has been inculcated with fear, perhaps through their religious studies on this side, on planet Earth, or just who knows why, they just maybe a fearful person in general, may be afraid to move forward and move on to what we may refer to just simply as the afterlife. So they hang out here and they do stuff. And that's, I think, typically what most people are referring to when they refer to as ghosts. And hauntings, he said. What exactly are ghosts and hauntings? In his question. Yeah, so they're, hauntings, those are mischievous. I think of those as mischievous beings. And to the extent that they are doing more negative things, those are negative beings. It's just another person. I mean, have you ever run into anybody while they're in a biological body who's mischievous? Of course you have. Have you ever run into anybody who's in a biological body who is negative and does bad stuff to other people? Of course, we all have. Everybody has. Right? If you're being honest with yourself, we've all run into people like that. Well, when they die, they take that same personality trait with them after they have no biological body. They don't all of a sudden become some angelic being who is a good deed doer all of a sudden if they were a jerk on this side. Okay? So that's an important principle to remember. We take our minds with us. That's why I do the work that I do to help people reduce their fears on this side. Because to reduce your fears, not only you're going to be a better person, but you can have a better life on this side. So we take that with us. The less fear we have, the better a life we're going to have in the afterlife as well. So these are important principles. So thank you, Jody, for asking that. Let's open it up to questions from you guys. So any follow-ups from that? Did I stir anything up there, or do you want more clarification on? Do you have a different question? Just go ahead. You can unmute yourself, obviously. Questions? You guys going to be shy today? Here we go.
It's Erica Davis.
Okay, Erica, yes.
Hey, I'm not camera ready yet today, but but I was just curious in what you thought the group, I forgot what you guys called them.
Are you talking about the 30th November talk?
Yeah, the group, the
movement. The movement.
Yeah, what the movement would say in a time like we've got with Israel and Hamas and all this Palestine. And I mean, I know, it's still kind of, they're fighting about things that they think, happened thousands of years ago. So I was just kind of curious on how it relates to the 30th November talk.
Well, that's a tough question.
I don't know very much about it, so that's why I'm kind of also curious.
You mean the 30th November talk?
Yeah, like how, because Jehovah had a lot of regrets.
Yes.
Had some regrets, and I just thought that was very interesting. I think about that all the time when I'm watching the news, and it's like, gosh, how does that resonate still?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I cannot speak for Jehovah. For those of you who don't know, what Eric is referring to, just briefly, that she was wrestling with, she was trying to remember what they call themselves. They call themselves the movement, okay? The they in this group of about, there's a core group of about 15 or 20 or so, 12 to 15 to 20, depends. In the, at different times, we each would see about 12 to 15 to 20 of them in the group. And typically one of them would kind of step forward and kind of be speaking to us at any given moment. And I still have had that experience, but much less so. It was every day during the run up to the 30th, from January to November 30th in 2014. A lot of us were having communications with them, multiple communications with every day, but now it's just very sporadic. But the group is made up of Jehovah, Jesus, John the Baptist, who was also Maharishi Mahesh Yogi in his 20th century lifetime, but 2,000 years ago he was John the Baptist. Those of you who know anything about the biblical stories. And Shankara, who was Vyasa in a previous lifetime. Those of you who have ever heard a book called the Bhagavad Gita, a story called the Bhagavad Gita, Gita, or the Mahabharata. The Bhagavad Gita is a story that comes out of this larger volume of work called the Mahabharata. Vyasa wrote that, okay? So Shankara and Vyasa are the same person in different time periods, okay? Same soul. So Shankara, aka Vyasa, is a member of this group. There's Swami Brahmananda Saraswati, who Maharishi refers to as Guru Dev. Those of you who know anything about the Vedic tradition, the student or the disciple always calls his or her teacher Guru Dev. Guru Dev just means, like, translated from Sanskrit to English, it means something like great exalted teacher or something. Okay. So Swami Brahmananda Saraswati, who was very well known in his lifetime. He died in 1953. So, whenever in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s. He was a very, very well known Indian in India, seer, a very sage, a very wise and highly respected and Indian guru. One of the most highly, arguably, one of the most, some would say the most, arguably most highly respected guru of his time during that time period in India. Okay. He was Shankaracharya, which is a title if you want to look that up, and so forth. So those are the main members of the group, and there are another dozen or 15 or something like that. Okay. And they, if you kind of paid attention to what I said, you got the Judeo, you got Christian, Islamic, and Vedic traditions there. Because who is Allah? That's Jehovah. Okay. So you got the main four big religions, we could say. There's thousands of religions on planet Earth right now, as we know, but the main big four, who were trying to change and move the needle away from cruelty. I'll just sum it up: away from cruelty towards a more kind and a loving and a more more civil, quite frankly, a more civilized treatment of other humans by humans. So that was their objective. Okay. Question that Eric was asking is, what do I think the movement would think about what's going on in the Middle East now? Well, this is just going to be my conjecture, because I have not heard any communications from them, and neither is George or anybody, about their thoughts on it, the actual movement's thoughts. But based on what I know about how they think and the general principles, I would say that they're very upset about it, that they see both sides, like most people unfortunately don't. People get very tribal, and they can only see their one side, and people are very much tied to the land. So that's a phrase. I know, Eric, if you remember that from the 30th November talk, where George did explicitly talk in his message from Jehovah. Again, George is not channeling. He's not a channel, but he had gotten a download, and we would get downloads, and he wrote stuff down that they said. And so there's a message from Jehovah to all of us in there, and there's a message in there to the Jews to not get tied to the land. But that this notion of not getting tied to the land, to me, this is like Kelvin Chin talking, not Jehovah talking. Okay, Kelvin Chin. I interpret that as nobody should get tied to the land. Only their soul is what matters. Everybody, each of us, our souls, our minds, our consciousness is what matters, not the house that we're living in, or the town that we live in, or the country that we live in. Right? So that's the way I look at it anyway. You guys have read my third book, my most recent book on my past lives. You know that I've lived on almost every continent in the last 6,000 years. And maybe I've lived in South America as well, and I just don't remember it. But I remember living on all the other continents on planet Earth. Now, I'm not saying everybody does what I do, travels around from lifetime to lifetime like I have to different religions. I've been in all the four major religions, and I've been in other religions in addition to the four major religions that we just mentioned. So my point is that not being tied to the land gives us a sense of freedom. And that's a big problem in the Middle East right now. I'm not saying that that's going to change overnight. I don't know if it ever will change, to be honest, because people get so tied to their physical possessions, and their physical possessions includes the country and the land that they live on. Never mind just the house that they're living in. I mean, what happens if I don't know if any of you have ever lost anything material like that? Material meaning, like a physical thing, like, your house in a fire or a flood or something. It's horrific. I'm not diminishing the emotional and financial and physical and even biological consequences from these events. I'm not diminishing it at all. I'm just saying who we are as an individual being in the universe, which is really what we're talking about today in these sessions, right? Monthly sessions. That, to tie that to a physical object is what? I mean, what kind of stability does that give you? And also, you guys, I say you guys, those of you who've taken my classes, you've heard me say this, and some of you may have been my students for thousands of years. You've heard me say this following phrase for thousands of years. Control what we can control and let go of what we can't control, right? That's one of the messages in this book, my Marcus Aurelius book. And Marcus Aurelius said that hundreds of times during his lifetime 2,000 years ago. And I still say it now, okay? So how much control, if you think about that one phrase, control what you can control and let go what you can't control. Well, what do you do when you identify who you are with a place or with a thing or with a home or with a whatever? What do you do? Don't you make yourself vulnerable to other people who want to hurt you, and then they just light your home on fire, or they blow it up, or they say you can't live here in this physical place? Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing, that you should just be pushed around by anybody and just move or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying one's identity, who we are as a soul, as a being, that increases our suffering the more we are identified with material things. That's just a general principle, right? And some of you may have had personal experience with that general principle, when we've gotten too identified with a physical thing, whether it's a person, a place, or an object, it doesn't matter, then it can cause us more suffering the more identified our soul, our existence, in other words, is with that place or that thing or that person, our existence, okay? I'm not saying that losing a loved one is not painful. I have lost many loved ones. Some of you guys know the story of my losing my mother at a very young age, when she was in her 50s. And it was emotionally devastating for me. So I'm not saying this, it doesn't come with pain, but my identity was not tied up in my relationship with my mother. Sadness, intense, devastating, intense sadness I experienced. But who I am as a soul, as a being, was not tied up with that. And in that way, there was a sense of freedom that persisted throughout that devastatingly emotional experience of losing my mom. So I understand it's very difficult. It's not an easy thing to navigate, especially when one has invested so much in living one's life in a certain part of the world, in this case, in Erica's case, in the Middle East, and there's generations that are going on, and there's a lot of memories for families and so forth. So I am not diminishing that at all. But that was what the message was from Jehovah, is to not get tied to the land. If you go back and listen to the 30th November talk. So, it's not a, it's a very thorny situation there. Neither side is right and neither side is completely wrong. That's the summary statement I'll give you on that. I don't know, Eric, if that helps at all. You want to follow up?
Great. Thank you so much. That's I love that you're not tied to, we're beings of light. We shouldn't be tied to one spot. We're just having an experience here.
Yeah, but there's a balancing act, though. I'm trying to articulate also that I get it. I understand. I mean, I don't think people should be moving around like I had to when I was Sitting Bull, right? We moved around because mainly weather, famine, where are the bison, what they call the American buffalo. It's really not a buffalo, it's a bison. Where are they migrating to? Our food supply, or what we make our tents and our clothes and our weapons out of, and so forth and so on. These animals, where are they going? So I'm not suggesting that that the 8 billion of us should be nomadic tribes, like nomadic people like that. That's not what I'm saying. But our soul, our identity, because my experience has been in this lifetime, as Kelvin Chin, this lifetime in the 20th and 21st century, that as I have grown in my own, I call it my own inner stability, my foundation within myself of who I am, and really kind of grounding myself in my independence of who I am. And I'm not saying independent in a narcissistic way. I'm saying independent because I know who I am. The more I know who I am, the more I can connect socially with other people, actually. That's really the order of things. It should be connect first within oneself and then connect with others, not using others as a way to kind of ground ourselves, I'm not saying don't have friends that you can confide in. That can be helpful. But really, we need to connect within ourselves first. I mean, really. But my point is that the more I've done that, the more I've been able to withstand life challenges. And those of you who know anything about my life know that I've been through some very severe, significant life challenges, not just my loss of my mom, but some, loss of my job 5 times and so forth, because a company gets bought and sold and this, that, and the other thing. And I'm over 50 years old. And you're trying to support a family of 4 and you're the sole breadwinner, that's a lot of stress. If you've never been in that situation, over 50 years old, 5 times, but my identity has remained intact. That's my point. And that comes from inside. And the more you have that, the better you can handle the outside, and the better you can make decisions that are not fraught with mistakes. Because we've all made mistakes. I make mistakes. I still make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. But the fewer mistakes you make, the more grounded you are inside. The more you're tied to the land or to a thing, an object, or whatever it is, the more unstable you're going to be, the more susceptible you are to being shaken by either external circumstances or people who want to do you harm. So, that's a tough message to tell people in the Middle East, because they've been dealing with this for thousands of years, not just since 1948 when the state of Israel was created, but thousands of years over there, I don't know. That helps.
That's why I asked. Thank you so much.
Yep. You're welcome. You're welcome. Somebody asked something in the chat. Oh, a couple of things in the chat. Let's see. 2 questions. One serious, one not so serious. Nicholas, do you want me to read this, or do you want to just say it out loud verbally?
No, you got it. I mean, the first one you covered. The second one.
Oh, did I already cover it? Okay.
We just discussed it.
Oh, I did. Oh, okay. Okay, good. Where's the second one? Nicholas, you're Kelvin. Okay, I am Nicholas, you're Kelvin. In the past life, you were Peter and others. Second, do we have a true name, a soul name? Oh, okay. I don't understand. What's the question in the first? You're Nicholas, Kelvin. Past life was Peter. Do we? Oh, a true name. So, no. What do you mean by true name? A soul name? No.
Well, yeah. Do you have like a soul name?
No. I mean, you have an identity. I call it an energetic identity. An identifiable energy pattern is the phrase that I use. Identifiable energy pattern. So I would recognize you on the other side. If I saw you, I might recognize you, but I'm not recognizing you because of your body. If I ever saw you, I don't know if I've ever seen you before, Nicholas, but anyway, but let's say I had. I wouldn't have to see your body. I would recognize your pattern. And you could call yourself whatever, and I could call myself another name, and you'd still recognize me. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's, remember, we are energy. That's what we are. But we do have an identifiable energy pattern. And the reason I came up with that phrase is because I've had many experiences with my friends on the other side, Jesus, Jehovah somewhat, more Jesus and John the Baptist and so forth, because they're, two of my very significant teachers in my many lifetimes, and including this one with John the Baptist, who was Maharishi in the 1970s when I studied with him. So I recognize their energy, is my point. And they don't have to tell me who they are. I just recognize them. I feel their identity, I guess, because really, isn't that what you're asking when you say a true name or a soul name? It's an identity marker. That's what our names are, right? Right?
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So, I mean, whoever named you Nicholas might have named you Thomas instead. Who knows, right? But does that change who you are? Would you be a different person? Of course not. You would be your same. That personality thread is what I talk about in my most recent book. That's gone through all of my many lifetimes that I remember so far. Right? No, it's a good question. Megan, last weekend we went to see the film After Death. Megan, do you want to ask this out loud?
It doesn't matter. I can if you want.
Yeah, why don't you? Because it's easier to hear you than for me to read it. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me see if I can phrase it concisely. So we went to see the movie After Death. I don't know if you saw it, if anyone has seen it. personally, I wasn't a big fan. And I guess the biggest thing that I'm kind of curious as to how you would explain is like, you know, they were talking about NDEs, if you're not familiar with the movie. And it was very mainstream, right? So, but they had talked about a percentage of NDEs being like hellish experience, and they interviewed some people who basically explained themselves falling, and like, and then when they finally connected to, you know, God, which doesn't really resonate with me because I'm not religious, and then, you know, and then they got pulled up to quote unquote heaven, and I just personally don't really believe in those things, but I don't believe that they're lying. So I'm wondering, how do you explain people who have those type of NDE experiences, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Okay. I'm just scribbling notes of what you just said, so a couple of words to remind myself to talk about certain things. That's what I'm scribbling on a piece of paper here. All right, so I don't forget. So, yeah, first of all, with NDEs, first of all, those of you who don't know what the acronym is, NDE stands for near-death experience. Near-death experience. So I had one where I almost drowned, and I talk about several near-death experiences in my first book on overcoming the fear of death. But the bottom line is this: there's this huge range of experiences where people could have a near-death experience. Some of you may have had near-death experiences, and you can share that if you want to in this discussion in a minute. But the thing is, there's no one way. So that's one general principle of any, I already said this to you guys at the beginning in my intro, right? Everybody's experience is different, is unique, and that includes near-death experiences. Now, there may be some certain characteristics that are very similar and so forth, but no experience is absolutely the same. So, negative, what about negative experiences? Hellish type experiences, you said. Well, first of all, there's no hell on the other side, just to get that one out of the way in case anybody's wondering, well, wait a minute, hellish? No, there's no structural place of punishment. That's just made up by some people. Some minds made that up. Maybe it's even promoted somewhat by some mischievous, we'll call them, minds on the other side too. I don't know, but I'm gonna put the blame on the on the religious institutions on this side. Okay, there's no punishment, but can you have a negative experience after you die? Yeah. What did I say earlier? I said about ghosts, and Jody's question about ghosts and hauntings and stuff. Those are fearful beings, typically, not all ghosts, but the ones who are negative and promoting some sort of fearful experience, and the people you're referring to who were in that movie, Megan, undoubtedly, in my opinion, and again, I'm not in their minds, you know, but if one could be in their mind, knowing about how their minds operate and how their emotions are, I would guess highly probable those people have fears about death and dying. And those fears came up in the form of some negative, hellish experience. I would almost guarantee you those people had some past experience, whether this lifetime or another lifetime. You got to remember, they may say, well, I grew up in a very liberal church this lifetime. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, yeah, but how about the one in the Middle Ages when you were whipped and and chained to a wall and all that? You know, who knows what their past experience is my point. All right, that's informing their current experience having an NDE in the 20th or 21st century. So that's what these expressions of experience are filtered through the person's consciousness at that moment in time, right? So that addresses the negative part, the hellish part. And what about the falling thing? So the falling, so a lot of times people will experience falling as a negative thing, just the experience of falling. Forget about anything else that's going on, okay? That feeling of sinking or falling, some people, I'd say a lot of people, probably most of the 8 billion people, if you just said, boom, here's this experience, and you gave them that experience, they would feel ungrounded, shaky, and they would interpret that as a negative experience. How many of you meditate? How many of you meditate? Now, and how many of you who meditated, who just raised your hand, your virtual hands here, have ever had an experience of settling down that could very much be described as falling or sinking inside yourself? I've had that experience, I don't know how many thousands of times out of the 40,000 times I've meditated so far in the 52 years I've been meditating. Right? Seriously. To me, it's an incredibly powerful, sublime, beautiful experience. To somebody who's never, ever had that experience, they go, whoa, 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 I'm falling. And it's negative to them. And then if they have, Megan, an experience of falling, as you seem to imply, that's followed subsequently by a negative content experience, some content, or who knows what their experience was, that they interpret as negative, then they package the whole thing as a negative experience, you see? But it could be that the experience of falling, what is that experience when you experience that in meditation or anytime? You don't have to be in meditation, by the way. You could be lying on a hillside, spacing out, looking up at the clouds. Or, I read something a few years ago, this woman was writing about at sunrise, at the beach, in the dunes, and looking at the waves rolling in. There was quiet and there was nobody around, just the birds. And then she, as if transcended almost, transcend just means to go beyond. She kind of transcended her environment, and she was in this experience of quietness and settling down and all this, what somebody might refer to as falling. Well, that experience, if you've never had the experience before, can be a shock to somebody. And I guarantee you, most people have not had that experience. Now, some of you may have had the experience also just going to sleep at night. How many of you had that experience? You're lying in bed at night, and as you're going to sleep, you're awake and you're asleep. Let's say call this waking and you call this sleeping down here. But you're in between. You're in that in between. Sometimes people refer to that as the twilight state or whatever. In between, you haven't completely zonked out and you're not wide awake, but there's awareness there. And how many of you have ever felt physically like you're falling? Right? Well, what, isn't there a phrase? Yeah, there's a phrase. We call it falling asleep. Where do you think that comes from? From the experience of falling, I would guess, right? Feeling like you're falling when you're falling into sleep. So, but people don't remember that, and they don't think of that. And when you're having a near-death experience, all of your past belief systems all come to the forefront, and your experience is filtered through that. And then to your question about God, the whole God experience, that is so common. It's like it doesn't mean that God exists. When people have an experience of incredible expansion, which they've never had before, those of you who've been meditating like I have, I know some of you personally, so I know some of you have been meditating as long as I have, maybe even longer than I have this lifetime. You've experienced this expansion like how many hundreds and thousands of times over the last 50 or 60 years. Some of you have been meditating longer than I have, right, Joe? So it's like, it's normal. This is not, but if you've never had that experience, you go, oh my God, I'm experiencing God. No, you may be experiencing your own the vastness of your own mind, because you've only experienced this part of your mind your whole lifetime, what I call the 8-inch bucket part of our mind, versus the whole football stadium, which is also your mind, but it's not activated. You're not aware of it. That's what most people's experience of life is. It's very, very limited. But once you've been meditating for a while and turning within, I call my meditation turning within meditation. You're turning within regularly, consistently. Every day you're turning within. That's normal. But for these people who've had these NDEs, Megan, I guarantee you probably 90% of them, maybe 99% of them, have not had this experience very often in their lives. And so, and then the other interpretation of God is the experience of light and feeling of love and acceptance. So that experience, that to me, that's an inanimate experience that they animate and they personify and say, that's God. Okay? So let me ask you this question. This is not necessarily to you, Megan, personally, but to all of you. Have you ever gone into the woods and from a city, like you go from a hustling, bustling city out into the country and then get out of the car and not open your windows? You're in this environment called a car, the closed environment, that's my point, from the hustling, bustling city, downtown Manhattan or San Francisco, wherever you live in the world, Paris, wherever, really busy. And then you go out into the country, you drive an hour, 2 hours out, and then you get out and it's silent. It's silent. Relatively speaking, it's silent. Is it really silent? No, there's birds chirping and this and that, and you can hear crickets and whatever you got going on in the environment. But you're out in the woods now, you're in a rural environment, and people say, oh, now when you get out of the car, is your immediate response an interpretation of that experience that you're now talking to, that you're experiencing God, right? What are you saying? If you do believe in God, and again, I'm not saying I believe in God or don't believe him. I don't get into my belief system unless you really want to push me. I'll answer you. But it's if you believe in God, what doesn't exist in the city? Only exists in the country, in the rural setting, because of the quietness. That's kind of what these people are saying, having this NDE, when they experience God. Quietness, that's another interpretation. So and then another one, a third or fourth, I'm losing track of how many interpretations we got of possible experiences somebody can have in NDE. A very common experience in NDE is that they're speaking to a being. So it is an animate being. It's not an inanimate, just a feeling of peacefulness and a feeling of love and acceptance. Okay. Now we're moved to, there's an animate being. Okay. Animate meaning a live being that they're talking to. And the immediate assumption for most people is whoever they're talking to on the other side is God. Okay, that's one, and then there's a further refined interpretation of that, I would say, which is that some people would say, no, not every being that I talk to on the other side, but the one I talked to was so powerful and so bright, that it must have been God. See, that's an interpretation. You see, I'm not saying, what I'm saying is it's not necessarily absolutely right. It's their interpretation. Okay. But they come back and they very often, they'll say that they're interpreting it through their belief system. They obviously believe in God, or they believe that a powerful being must be God in their mind. Okay. Those people who don't believe in God go to the other side and have an NDE, and their interpretation is different. Their interpretation is, I experienced a very powerful light being. Doesn't have to be interpreted as God, right? Does that help, Megan?
Yes, thank you.
I know that wasn't your question, but I'm kind of... Go ahead.
I think you answered the question.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm kind of reinforcing your discernment is the word. I'm reinforcing your discernment because discernment is crucial in life in general, whether we're on this side or the other side. And I say this to all of you because recently I had a conversation with a student of mine I'm trying to how I can say this so that I don't want to give too much away, so that if the person ever brings this up, that they could be identified. I try to keep things private and confidential, you know. Let me say it to you this way. So I had a conversation recently with a student from another country outside the United States. I won't say which country or even which continent, but and this person had some very explicit communications with beings on the other side. And he or she, my student, I don't want to say if it's a he or a she, I'll just call this person they. So they it had a certain interpretation and listened to the advice that they were given from the other side. They thought it was good advice, obviously, and it turned out to be bad advice, which, again, I don't want to get too much details, which led them down a road of suffering. Okay, that's enough to say on that. Enough details. Okay, so what are those data points that I'm pointing out to you? Point out to you. Make up your own mind. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm teaching. Do not just blindly follow a bright light being on the other side, whatever he or she or they or it says to you and advises you. Use your own judgment all the time on this side and the other side, including after you biologically die. I would argue especially after you biologically die, because people are more vulnerable after they biologically die because they come with this incorrect belief system that everybody on the other side is there. They get this cartoonish kind of way of thinking about heaven, meaning like everybody's there on a harp, playing harps and living on clouds and stuff. You guys remember the cartoons, the old cartoon images of that? That's what they, oh, the dog dies and they're up on there playing a harp. Oh, that person died in the cartoon and now they're up on a cloud playing a harp and they got angelic wings. No, everybody's mind continues. So you need to carry your discernment wherever you go. I'm not saying to be afraid on the other side. I'm saying to be smart, be wise, have your eyes open. You know the phrase, I was talking to my friend George this morning, and he mentioned that there's a phrase, and some of you guys know the Bible much better than I do. I'm not a follower of the Bible at all, but notwithstanding, as Nicholas pointed out, that, I have memories being Simon Peter, but, Christianity is not what Jesus was teaching. So, but George was quoting something about, from the Bible. It says something like the Lord's mansion has many rooms or something like that. Whatever it is, you guys, or 100 rooms or whatever it is. You guys know the quote. But the point is, in terms of what I'm advising and suggesting to you, is to make sure you go in the room that you want to go in. Don't go in a room because somebody says you should. Okay? You go where you want to go. I don't know. Does that help? I hope that helps. Anne, do you want to ask a question? Speak it out loud. We can hear your mellifluous voice. Anne? You still here? I don't know.
Oh, hi. Sorry, I thought I had.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi.
Hey.
You were talking about Jehovah earlier. So my understanding is that Jehovah was the God of the Old Testament of the Bible, right? Mm. And I've heard you say that, and somebody referred to that, he made some mistakes when he was, I don't know, pretending to be God or something. And so the Jehovah of the Old Testament, So when the New dispensation was brought in, was Jehovah still the God of the new dispensation? And if so, are people, excuse me, are Christians still praying to that Jehovah, pardon me, who made those mistakes in the old dispensation? Is that the same God? And so is Jehovah the God of this universe that people are praying to? I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah, so I'll ask you for clarification. So so Jehovah is the personality, is the phrase I like to use, because he's a personality. He has a personality just like you have a personality, so do I. And we're all different personalities. So he has a soul or and a personality that's unique to him. Okay, Jehovah. Did Jehovah, the way I look at, again, I underscore the fact that the statement I already made, which I am not a biblical scholar and I don't know the Bible well at all. I went to Sunday school and I really didn't pay. I didn't pay attention. Just to be clear and succinct on it. So, but what I've learned from my Bible friends, my friends who did pay attention and of different Christian and Jewish and whatever religious persuasions, is that yes, Jehovah is that what people refer to as God in the Old Testament. And the way my interpretation, this is Kelvin Chin, you know how I language things and try to make it into simple English, is that the way I think of it is, Jehovah allowed himself to be perceived as God. So to me, there's a certain responsibility that Jehovah acknowledges, and he has told me more recently, like within the last 3-4 years, I've had some of my own private conversations with Jehovah, where he's emphasized to me to emphasize to you guys, to my students, what he calls his apology to all of humanity, that he allowed, and arguably some of you may say, because you know the Bible better than I do, you may say that he encouraged, in the way that whoever wrote the Bible anyway, whether they were quoting him correctly or not, whatever, the overall interpretation was that he was ordering people to do stuff, and that his orders should be followed. Again, I'm just translating this in the Kelvin Chin plain English, right? Mm-hmm. And that he has explicitly come to me. So again, without me knowing all the details of all this past stuff and so forth, I do know that he has come to me privately within the last, let's say, 3-4 years or something like that, asking me to be very explicit with people about his apology, referring specifically to the idea of divinity and worship, those concepts that he allowed to happen, and maybe arguably you would probably say encouraged to happen, that he apologizes to anybody who followed his say orders, his whatever you want to call them. There's probably some religious term that you guys know that I don't know, again, but you know what I mean. Who followed his instructions, who followed his orders to do this and to do this and to don't do this, and to go marry this person and go do this and da. And he apologizes because he realizes that even though he had never had any intention to harm people, to hurt people, or to be unkind, that it set up a mentality in each of us who may have followed that thinking of devotion, being devoted to him as a God, or as many people view him as the God, capital G, that it created a sense of devotion and blindness, is his point that he made to me, that And that blindness has set people up to be persuaded by unkind people to be blindly devoted to them. And that has created suffering unintentionally by him, unintentionally by Jehovah, has created suffering in some of you, in much of humanity, arguably, because the people have become blindly devoted to people who are narcissistic, who are cruel, who are just not looking out for your best interests. They may not be totally narcissistic or totally really cruel, but they may just be much more self-centered and selfish than would be healthy for you. And that devotional mentality has led so many hundreds of millions of people down that road. And that's what he views as a mistake. If you want to, I don't know what, I guess whoever else was referring to this phrase of that he made mistakes. But that's a mistake that he definitely would call a mistake. I don't know if that's what the mistake he was referring to, but I know that he has asked me to be explicit and very forthright and upfront with people about this apology from him, about this blind devotion thing. That how it does everybody is that clear what I'm trying to articulate here?
Yeah. Yes, it is. But I have another question. Is he still posing as God in the new dispensation? Like what's called the New Testament?
First of all, I don't know what you mean by what's the phrase new I've never heard that new dispensation.
Well, the new the Bible is divided into the Old Testament and New Testament. So the old things were done away with when Jesus came, supposedly.
Oh, that's what you're referring to. Okay.
Yeah.
No. So no, Jehovah views himself as Jehovah, as he always has, and he has never viewed himself as capital G God. So it's explicitly clear in all the communications, not just that I've had or George has had, but many other people. I referenced the fact in the introduction today that there are at least 24 people who I never knew. I didn't know them. They're all around the world, who contacted me back in 2014 because they knew I was organizing the event. So they somehow found out how to connect with me on Facebook and stuff, and who told me that they got similar messages. So no, the movement, nobody in the movement has ever met or knows anything about a capital G God. That's the summary statement on that. So not only does he not view himself as God, he's saying, they're all saying they don't know God, if there is a God, does God exist? And many of them view no need for there to be a God because almost all of them view our souls as eternal, and eternal means no beginning, no end. That means no need for a creator of the universe or whatever, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a more abstract discussion, but that's the answer to your question.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah. No.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Gratzina, do you want to ask this? Oh, yeah. See, so you're asking the creation question, Gratzina. So how did our unique identities were created? So that's the $1 million, $100 million, $1 billion question. So, I don't know the answer to that question, Gratzina. That's the answer. Okay. Oh, you're at work. Okay. But that's the answer to the question. I don't know. All I know is my personality is what it is. And as I described in detail in my third book, my most recent book about my past lives over the last 6,000 years, I give you the trail. It's like a trail of breadcrumbs, over the 6,000 years, and how there's these different markers over the 6,000 years that show my personality is pretty much being the same. It expresses itself in different ways, it's never expressing itself in exactly the same way, but there are these major threads in my personality that have traveled with me because it's me. It's part of me. Now, can it change? Yes. Not only can they express differently, but our personalities can change over long periods of time. But a narcissist is going to be a narcissist probably for thousands of years, and probably already has been a narcissist for thousands of years. Okay, so that's because the narcissist is extreme. Okay, and for that person to change into an altruistic person, a giving, loving, altruistic, thinking of others, an empathic person, that's a huge shift. You know, that's thousands and thousands of lifetimes probably. But, you know, we all change somewhat, but slowly over time. Catherine, oh, see you next. Okay, fine. That's okay. Other questions? I just finished going through the chat room. Other questions? Live questions? Yes. Hey, Stokes.
Hi. So the whole thing that you were just talking about not being devoted, that was the mistake that Jehovah made. But are there people that maybe should be genuine bhakti, that their evolution is going to be best through the path of devotion? And obviously that's a tricky situation because you got to be careful who you're devoted to. But yeah, is there a bhakti path? Is that still considered a viable path? You know, some people are, I know people that are devoted, for example, to Amachi, the Kelvin Chin in India, but they're different bhakti path. Is that still a legitimate path for people, some people?
Well, look, Stokes, here's the thing. What's legitimate? What's not legitimate? Everything is legitimate. I mean, even the path of cruelty is, what does legitimate mean? You know, is it does it exist? That's the way I think. I mean, yeah, it exists. And cruelty exists even. Forget about bhakti. We'll come back to the bhakti thing in a second. But just legitimate, you know, does it exist? Yeah, cruelty exists. Is it a good path? Well, it's good for the cruel person. So so a cruel person would argue they don't think of themselves as cruel. The bully does not think of him or herself as cruel. The bully thinks of themselves as, I don't know what, assertive, strong. I'm a strong person. I can lead the country. I am a strong person. Nobody can tell me what to do. That, the bully is like a chest pounder, but they're really weak inside. So, but if you ask the bully, is their path a legitimate path? It's like, yeah, it works. When I tell that person that they're a jerk, or I make fun of them, and I make up funny names, and everybody laughs at them, it works because I feel better. So it's legitimate. It's totally legitimate, right? So, but it's a poor choice, in my opinion, from a long-term standpoint, because then you're surrounding yourself with miserable and more miserable people who you got to make more miserable than you even made before, because they get used to being miserable, and now and they're okay with being miserable, and you got to make them even more miserable for you to feel better.
Yeah.
So it's just, I'd say, it's a poor choice. But bhakti, here's the thing. Bhakti, which those of you guys don't know, bhakti is a Sanskrit term. It just means devotion, but it means blind devotion. It really means blind devotion, full on following completely without question. Okay. It's as legitimate as any other path. But again, looking through it through the lens that I was just suggesting with the cruelty one, is it a path that's going to, in the long run, Stokes, long run, short term makes you feel great. Oh, so devoted to my guru or to my God or my whatever, and you're totally devoted, and I do anything they say. They say me to jump, you say how high, and I carry the water up the stairs. I don't care how many hundreds of times they make me carry it up and down the stairs, and they dump out the water and they don't even drink it, and they just make me carry it up and down the stairs. Just because I know that it's going to make me a better person. That level of devotion that to me makes no sense can make some people feel good. So, okay, short term. But then what happens long term? See, that's the thing. I have a long-term vision on everything in life, the good, bad, and the ugly, you know? And so what's the long-term effect of that is, to me, is it weakens the discernment. Weaker discernment creates more likeliness, higher probability of suffering and being taken advantage of by other people. Right? Who does the thief go after, and who does the thief go after? The thief goes after people who have their wallet hanging out of their pocket, right? The thief goes after the car that has the keys in the ignition, or the keys that are sitting on the floor mat. You know, people do that. I'm not exaggerating. People do that because they're worried about losing their car keys. Oh, I missed my car, lost. They leave them on their visor, or you know, maybe not in the ignition, but you know, on the floor mat. You know, they'll think they'll hide it under their foot pedal. You know, I know people I've heard of people doing that. You know, but you just look at the thief, and the thief is not stupid. They look at, oh, there's the car keys to steal his car. You know, it's the same kind of thing with narcissists and bullies. They'll look at you and they'll say, oh, that person is a yes person. That's the person I want to hang around with, and surround myself with more of those kind of people because I can push them around. Right? That's the side effect of bhakti.
Yeah. And I guess I guess what I'm asking is, you know, is this a path? You know, we talk about different spiritual paths. They're supposedly, if there is such thing as enlightenment, they're a path to enlightenment. So is that affected maybe by, if there's lack of discrimination, then maybe that's not such a good path?
Yeah, that's what I would say. And then what's enlightenment? You know, in the schools,
yeah, that's a good question too.
in the schools that you're talking about, enlightenment is a state of perfection. And my experience and my conversations with all of these great gurus, you know, Yogananda, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, Swami Brahmananda Saraswati, Shankara, who used to be Vyasa, who wrote the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita, is that there is no such thing, that they came up with this idea to inspire and to motivate people, but it was aspirational, not real, not reality.
Yeah.
And that they all started having experiences that made them feel like they were close to it, so that maybe when they died, they would actually reach that state. But then they died and realized that they still had their individuality. They didn't merge and lose their individual consciousness. Their individual consciousness stayed with them, which now leads them to believe that there is no such thing. And to me, I'm a pragmatist. You guys know, a lot of you've read my books and heard my other, you know, YouTube talks and lectures and so forth. I'm a pragmatist. I look at it and I go, whether there's an enlightenment or not, who cares? Who cares? I'm not going to live my life based on an aspiration to try to reach that, because I'm living day to day, improving myself. And if I'm looking for eternity, why not improve myself all along the way? Instead, what you have is a lot of people sitting in caves, or the equivalent of caves now today, 21st century caves, being their dorm rooms or their condominiums or their houses, sitting there meditating all day, trying to get to this state and not living their lives. To me, it's absurd. That's absurd. It's ridiculous. It's like, what? No. Yeah. So whether enlightenment exists or not, we can debate that. To me, it's irrelevant. Life is about living, and living in the continual present, moment to moment. Enjoy life. We're here. Let's hang out together. Let's go have you know, have fun. That's
Right.
that's what it's all about. It's not
Yeah.
about it's not about devotion to some being, or whether it's a light being, or whether it's God, or whether it's you know, Amaji, who you mentioned. You know, she's, those of you who don't know, she's she's a female guru from India. It doesn't matter who you're devoted to. Devote yourself to yourself.
Mm.
I mean,
Yeah.
don't devote, to me, that's the equivalent of what we talked about earlier, is devoting yourself to something material that's external to you.
Yeah.
Right? It's no different.
Right.
It's no different, right?
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's good.
Yep, good question, Stokes. Anything else before we go? Anything else? Any other questions, folks?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Patricia.
Yeah, I know it's a good thing, but I'm a masseuse and I'm taping my massages, but I only did my second today, and I was checking it. The angle of the camera is not good yet, but I saw orbs, and I know it's a good thing. And I was really happy that I saw it in the beginning. I didn't see the whole hour, but yeah, what does it mean? I think it means a good thing. It's nice, it's beautiful.
Yeah. So did you say that when you were doing a massage on somebody, you saw orbs? Is that what you said, Patricia?
I saw it on the video.
Oh, on the video.
Yeah.
Which video did you see?
The video that I made. So I'm massaging somebody, and then on the back,
yeah,
I saw. I didn't see the whole hour. This was like in the first minute. Like I saw like 5.
Yeah. So who knows? If when you see orbs like that, it could be, well, first of all, it could be just the angle of a camera and the lighting, and it may have nothing to do with beings on the other side. So that's possible. But let's say it's not that. Let's say it's not a lighting issue. So let's say it's otherwise cannot be explained. Then it probably is some beings on the other side that you're seeing somehow on the video. And is it good? Well, you would ask yourself, how does it feel? That's what how does it feel? Does it feel good? And it's good. So I don't think you need to look at it too much more deeply than that, right? And what does it mean? It just means that, well, look, I mean, it means that you're seeing into the other side through that video. You have a video image of seeing into the other side. Now, all right, because the other side, as I've said in others of my lectures, is right here. It's not up in the sky. I was watching football yesterday. They get a touchdown, everybody's going like this, they're, to their dead loved ones or God or Jesus or who knows what. It's always up in the sky. It's not up in the sky. It's right here. Heaven and the afterlife is right here among us right now. We just don't see it. Well, I can see into some. Most people are not seeing it. It's right here. So it doesn't mean anything unless you interpret some meaning from it. That's between you and yourself to interpret something. And if there's some communication between you and some beings on the other side, Petrushka, then that's, again, for you and them to kind of figure out. But just the mere fact that it happened is just you seeing into the other side, which is right here. Does that help?
Yes.
Yeah. It's just that we don't normally see it because, we could say the frequency is different, but some of us can shift our consciousness, our mind, to see into the other side sometimes when our vibration or our frequency, whatever you want to call it, is slightly different. I think fear clouds our eyes a lot, right? Fear, you could say, changes our frequency. It just clouds our mind, right? So that's why I'm the anti-fear guy. Anti-fear. I help people get rid of their fears. That opens up their eyes more to whatever, whether it's stuff on this side or seeing into the other side even, right? Does that help?
Yes, no, I was happy that I told it. Because I give massage with my eyes closed, so I wouldn't see it when I'm doing it.
Interesting. Yeah.
So it was a surprise.
Interesting. Yeah. No, I've had experiences like that. This kind of full circle back to Jody's question here. I'll add this. Let's see. I was 27 years old. Well, the first in terms of the orb experience, and then I'll tell you about a ghost experience I had. Let's see. So my wife was pregnant, and we were going to those birthing classes, birthing classes where you learn to, what's going to happen when your wife gives birth. In my case, my wife gives birth. But we both would go to these birthing classes from our first child, Jesse, when he's 35 years old now. So this was 3 decades ago. And I remember we were at the person, the woman's house who was teaching the class. And there were half a dozen of us in there, 6 or 8 of us in her living room. And I remember seeing a shadow walk behind her, about 12 feet behind her in the hallway. And there was nobody else in the house. We were all the biological human beings anyway were in the living room in this birthing class. So that was a very clear experience I had. And I mentioned it to the woman afterwards, and she says, "Oh yeah, we have ghosts in the house." She was well aware of it, evidently. And another time, when I was about 10 years earlier, I was 27 years old, and I was in a vacant house overnight, just sleeping overnight. The short version of the story is that my fiance and I went to sleep overnight in an extra house that some friends of ours had that was vacant, but it had beds in it and furniture and so forth. And basically, they used this big old house built in the 1800s for storage of stuff. And it had two-story house and an attic. And so we go up, they give us some blankets and pillows and stuff, and we just sleeping overnight there. Oh, and we were going to use the first floor of their house for our wedding reception. And so we went to check it out. So they said, "Oh, just sleep overnight. Just go check it out. Sleep overnight." So we got some blankets and pillows and stuff, and we go up to the second floor. And within 5-10 minutes of us turning off the flashlights, it is a house built in the 1800s, no electricity in it. So we had flashlights, turned the flashlight off. Within 5 or 10 minutes, furniture starts moving around in the attic. I mean, not just a little bit, but like imagine a couch, a sofa being moved 6 feet, dragged across the floor, and then stops. Or a big dresser, a big heavy wooden dresser being dragged across the floor, another 6 or 8 or 10 feet, and then stops. And then that's how loud and that's how long the noises would last. And this went on for about 10-15 minutes. And finally I said, of course, my fiance and I we're trying to go to sleep. And I said, "Oh my God." And so I said out loud to them, I said, "Look, we're only going to use the first floor that one afternoon in, I don't know, it was a month or 2 or whenever, for our reception. We'll clean it up. We know this is your house. We're not moving in, don't worry. And we'll leave it just as clean as as clean as it was when we found it. We'll clean it up. Everything will be fine." And as soon as I finished saying that, silence the rest of the night. A month or 2 later, or whenever it was we had the reception, no issues. So that's very, very, very clear. Nobody in the house but us. Nobody upstairs except stored furniture in the attic, moving around for 15 minutes, dragged across the floor 5, 10, 8, 10 feet. Multiple times during the 15 minutes. Okay. So other questions? Other questions? Other questions? Those are just beings who are just being mischievous. They weren't being mean or anything. They were just mischievous, hanging around. Yeah. Any other questions, Petrushka? Anything else? Other questions? Anything? Anybody?
I have a nice ghost story.
Okay, go ahead.
This was many years ago. I was young. I was sleeping with my boyfriend, and then maybe around 5 o'clock in the morning, the door opened, and a guy was standing there, and he said, I looked at the guy, and I saw his sneakers, I saw a white training suit that he had on, but I didn't see a face that was fake. And then he was talking, he said the door was open, and if I was you, I would look if everything is okay upstairs. And I was looking all the time with my eyes went up and down. I saw his whole body, but no face. And then my boyfriend got up and we went with him, that he went outside and to look upstairs. He came back and he said, everything is okay. I said, you know, I saw the whole body, but I didn't see a face. And he said, I heard the whole conversation. I had the feeling that I was walking behind somebody, but he didn't see anything. And after that, he didn't want to talk about it anymore. He was so afraid.
Yeah,
So I saw more than him, but it's funny, yeah, he heard him saying, talking.
interesting. Yeah.
I'm from Holland.
So I got some questions here on the Facebook Live here. So let me look at these. I just got to look here. It's a good thing I looked. So Jeremy says, why are we here for thousands of years on Earth? I mean, is there anywhere else we can go, or have you been anywhere other than Earth? So yeah, I talk about this in this book, Jeremy. This is my third book, my past life book. You just Google my name and you can see all three of my books. Just Google my name. But yeah, I've lived on another planet. You don't have to come back to Earth all the time. I think people, for the most part, tend to come back to where they're familiar with. So this goes to, I coined this phrase. It's not my phrase, but you know, I'm sure other people have used this phrase too. But the familiarity principle. I think that there's a familiarity principle that runs through all minds, wherever they are, on planet Earth or other planets too, in the universe, where you tend to go back to the ones you're familiar with. And I think you tend to go back to the cultures you're familiar with. I'm not, if you guys haven't figured out yet, I'm kind of an outlier. I'm an out-of-the-box kind of guy. You know, I always have been. And so for me to go to this culture and live in China, or live in we now call Southeast Asia, or to live in what we call Germany, what we used to call Prussia, or Rome, or in Judea, or live in Africa, and I lived throughout the United States, in the Great Plains when I was in the 1800s, when I was Sitting Bull, so forth. As a slave in Africa, I've had all these different lifetimes. I don't know for a fact, but my guess in terms of how my experience with human personality is that most people pretty much do the same thing. They kind of go, look at how many of my friends from high school, and I love my high school friends. I love them, and it was great to see them, a number of them, a few weeks ago when I gave the 2 library talks back in my hometown, in my area. That said, one of them told me that, I haven't looked this up yet, but they told me that the town that we grew up in is in the Guinness Book of World Records as the town where the fewest people leave to live elsewhere, that they just hang out in the same area. And it made me think that about this familiarity principle, and I don't think it's unique to just the town that I grew up in. I think you guys think of where you guys have grown up and so forth. How many people did you know have lived in 7 countries in 28 cities like I have? Not that many. Most people like to hang out. And I think that's, so yes, you can go anywhere, Jeremy, but the issue is, do you choose to? That's the thing. So you can, but would you choose to go to another planet where the gravity is different, where we look different? Like if you read my book, I talk about the description of what we looked like. Well, I didn't see myself, of what my friends look like anyway, and I am assuming that I look like them, because my feeling in that experience that I had of the water, of the inland sea, the water, I think for some reason I just know it was an inland sea. How do I know that? I don't know. But on that planet, the feeling of water on my skin felt differently, assuming it was H2O water and not some other formula of liquid. But assuming it was H2O water, like on planet Earth, which I think it was, it felt different on my skin. I think it's because my skin was, my body, I had an alien, not a human body. So you can go anywhere, Let's see. Sai, I see your question here. Let's see. Yeah, Pamela was saying, I have the falling experience in sleep. I always wake up before I hit the ground. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and Georgia was saying she knows about the expansion. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in my father's house, there are many mansions. Thank you, Georgia. That's the quote. Yeah. Yahweh. Yeah, and Yahweh was the original name. I talk about this experience that I had in my recent book. I talk about this experience that I had in 1979. Was it 79 or 78? Anyway, it was either 1978. Yeah, I think it was 1978. I had this experience where I started speaking in Hebrew, and I didn't know I was speaking in Hebrew. I just was babbling stuff, and I was in a group meditation, and a guy, I can still picture him, glasses, dark hair, kind of short guy, shorter than I am anyway. I'm 6'2", so maybe he's like 5'7", 5'6", and he came up to me and said, "Do you know what you've been saying?" I said, "No." And I was saying Yahweh and other things. I can't remember what are the other things I was saying. And he said, "Well, Yahweh is God." Anyway, he started telling me this stuff. Yeah. Any other questions? I think I answered the questions on the Facebook. So good. Great to have everybody on. We'll see you in a month. Compile more questions. Feel free to shoot me an email with them if you can't make the session on the 30th of November. Actually, 30th November. So 30th November will be the 2023. So it'll be the 9th anniversary. All right, doing my math right. It'll be the 9th anniversary of the original talk that was really the milestone talk in 2014. Milestone, sticking a flag in the ground kind of a thought. That's the image that I had that our friends on the other side did when they wanted to clarify all those points that they talked about. So again, if you haven't seen the 30th November talk, you can go to it on the link in the event page, or you can go to it 30thnovember.com, or you can find some summaries of it and of me talking about it as well on my kelvinchin.org website. You just go there and you'll click on the appropriate page, you'll see it, and click around there, and you'll find some short kind of I guess I would call kind of synopses kind of discussions that I did. And you can look there either before or after you watch the actual talk itself. Well, great to see everybody. Thanks for your questions and your interactions. I hope it's helped. Again, what's my goal? My goal is to help reduce fear, reduce anxiety about death and dying, so that we can live more fully here now in the continual present. Past lives doesn't matter who we were or if we even remember any of our past lives. What matters is, how have they informed us about who we are today? That's what matters. Not who you think you are, not who I think I was. That doesn't matter. What matters is, has it helped me today? And do these memories help you in the way you look at yourself, your own memories that you may have? How does that inform you about your personality? And that will help you today in being a better you of who you are now in the present day, 2023 Earth. Okay? Great to see everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Welcome. You're very welcome.